And that's led to this, which is remarkably, and I think wonderfully, honestly, because I have a startup food business that I'm deliberately going after Tesco. And I'm counting on people talking about what's truthful and hopefully using social media myself to get it out there. But as I said, it's a bane and it's a boon. So you think to yourself, well, I've just 60 years of change and upheaval and gosh, everything's changed, right? But the reality is, that's what's changed. That's what's changed. That's what's changed. I interviewed a guy at Bain Consulting, one of the big consulting groups, about retail. He had just come from the Davos Economic Forum and presented on retail, the global state of retail. And he said the problem with executives today in these retail companies is that they grew up at a time when it wasn't broken, and now it is, and they don't have any answers left. And again, reinforces the idea of what your opportunity is. So the thing that you need to start by, if you want to be able to capitalize, particularly on social media, is you have to start by asking yourself, why should someone care? You know, there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of ideas out there, but the fact is, why should someone really deeply care? Like, you know, the reason I'm kind of overemphasizing how kind of crappy it is at times is because, you know, you're like a guerrilla fighter. You got to make every bullet count. So you got to start by asking why someone should care and never stop asking. I can tell you many times I've met with those companies and the consumer never comes up. And then make them care. So let's talk about the disillusioned consumer as to how hard it is to reach people these days. So first of all, as I said, emotion drives most purchases. Anywhere from 60 to 90%, it's very category dependent. Not every category is actively shopped. Think about it in a grocery context. A category that is not actively shopped would be, say, cigarettes, tobacco. A category that's actively shopped would be wine. People are exploring. So, but when it comes to making most purchases, the one that I've found really interesting, and I worked with a shopper psychologist for a while, was cleaning products. Cleaning products I would have thought were not emotional, but apparently for women, it's emotional. You know, so don't take for granted the fact that emotion underpins everything. So what's happened is we've got declining media attention. I've heard this number bandied around. It's not attributable, but basically it's 89% of ads aren't even noticed. 7% are viewed unfavorably, 4% are viewed favorably, and they don't get you in the shopping list. But this is an actual study that was done that showed basically, it was done in the United States, digital natives, kind of 20-somethings, always connected. You know, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, people would go through about 4 media outlets an hour. Now they go through 27 media outlets an hour. So when they're faced with advertising, they switch off, they switch on to something else, and they're connected to multiple screens. So, and a lot of companies' response to that is they double down and they invest in websites. But the reality is, according to Nielsen, and I've seen that this number has dropped, the typical visit to a website is only 56 seconds and self-directed. With respect to the human equation, which is retail, physical retail's great advantage is being able to deal with a person. According to the British Retail Council, 50% of staff actually send customers away or hide in the back because they lack product knowledge. And that's because some guy, an accountant with a spreadsheet, sees the human factor as a number, not in terms of brand ambassador. And sadly, 20% of these people lie daily to customers because they don't have the knowledge they need. And so where the rubber hits the road, if you look at retail, so if media is not working, internet is only part of the equation, and people equation is not what it could be. The actual process of making a decision, according to both Kantar and Nielsen, is that most decisions in a grocery store are made within 3 feet of the products in as little as 12 seconds. That's a very quick decision. Someone is not thinking about the brand that they're buying. And so we also know this. This was a huge study that was done. Basically over 52 weeks, 35 million households involved. And what it found was that in a typical grocery store, 35,000 items available, households, poor, medium, rich, buy about 0.7% of what's available. In the year this study was done, last year, there were 190,000 new product codes registered. So again, but you think, well, so what does that say about our business opportunity? I say this is the best opportunity ever, because I've seen companies, I work with companies that basically are stealing share from these bigger companies. In the United States, the fastest growing food businesses are all under $100 million. And they're taking share from the big companies because you're going to see the world differently than these guys in the boardrooms, which is awesome. And again, as I've already said, 3/4 of them fail. Don't do what they do. So I'm going to talk to you about the critical planning tools. The first one I'll reference is what I call brand essence. So brand, essentially, the essence of something is the quality or qualities that make a thing what it is. And it's really important for you to get to the heart of it. If you walk into a hotel, Four Seasons, and they know your name, and you're whisked to the front, you're treated with respect, your room is beautiful, that's the brand. If you show up, they don't care you're there, you wait in a line, and the room is dirty, that's the brand. So brands are formed by a combination of logic and emotion. They are the way that we interact. Every way that we interact with the brand forms our impression of it. As I've said, it's more than a logo. And it's mainly about behavior. So just to get this point across about the strength of a brand, I'm going to show you 3 images and see how quickly impressions of these brands come to your mind. That one. How about that one? Canadian, by the way. Or one of my favorites is this one. And people laugh. I showed this to my wife. I said, I'm going to show this. She said, well, that's not a brand. I said, of course it's a brand. That's the ultimate logo. If I ask people in the room, who doesn't know what the employees of this company look like? Right? Who doesn't know what you can expect as a customer of this company? You all know what to expect. See, that's the power of a brand, is when someone can look at something and immediately it conjures up images and impressions. So essentially, brands define what we stand for as a business. They help people choose, they help people buy in, and they're vitally important. So the key questions that you've got to ask yourself around brand essence are these. Why is the world better with you in it? You've got to start with that. I can tell you right now, in every category, there's room for you. Every category, but you got to start by being really clear on why you are different. You know, who needs to care? What do they value? You know, those 15 executives, the 14 guys who never bother shopping with their wife should be kicked out of the business. If you don't understand what your customer goes through, get out. You know, you got to say, how do we live up to our values and purpose for those we serve? This is a really big thing, because this is where companies get it entirely wrong, is they miss the detail. I'm running out of time. I can't give you too many examples here, but trust me, you've got to figure out where the rubber really hits the road for your brand. You've got to figure out the touch points, and you've got to figure out where to invest, because the small things count. You know, how's this different than the competition? And finally, what's it worth, and how are we going to convince people to pay it? I have spent a year dealing with Tesco. This is a company who drives me mad. They will tell you that the only thing people care about is cheap, and they are wrong. The research is clear. 17% of people in this country have to rely on price, 83% trade up. Those are the guys you're after. How do you convince them? Just what you are. Apple doesn't charge £1,000 because they're a laptop. Like, think about it. This is the heart of it. You got to think, what do people value? How do we get them to pay for what we value back to them? So important. So I'm just very quickly, and this is what I'm going to give to Claire. You guys can look at this in more detail. Really, this is kind of a typical brand essence wheel where you look at kind of what's the core of your brand, what's the vision, how do we talk, how do we behave, what's the strap line, what's the proof, etc. Really quickly, this is the one from my own food business, the Edible Inventions Company. The core of the brand is about creativity and possibility. The mission is to be the most creative food business in the world in how we create products for retailers and consumers, and in how we build the kind of culture to make bold things possible. I did that because of craft. I wrote this because of Unilever. So you can see why I would say that. We are fundamentally about being creative in the way that we use food, and creative in the way that we create the kind of pricing that allows people to get great food that's not bad for them, that's accessible to everybody. So that's an example of it. It's useful to go through this, and again, you'll have a copy of it. So the next one is a really critical planning tool is the path to purchase. So I'll give you 3 examples. Path to purchase is, so you're an 18-year-old guy who dreams about being in a rock band one day, and you want to buy a Gibson guitar, or you're a 48-year-old guy like me, and you wish you were 18 again. That's not me, by the way. And you want to buy a Gibson guitar. Okay, so you got an 18-year-old guy, or you got a 48-year-old guy. They both follow very, very different paths to purchase, you can imagine. This is what this is about. understanding who your high-value shopper, your high-value consumer is, and understanding and walking a mile in their shoes, and understanding in detail the route that they follow.